card is about being obsessed with wealth or clinging too tightly to your money or possessions. Stay tuned to learn the positives and negatives of this card, as well as how to interpret it when it shows up in a reading. Hi everybody, I'm Sue Ellen Clayton. Welcome to my channel where we'll be learning the tarot deck one card at a time. Today's video is about the Four of Pentacles. This video will begin with a short description of the card. Next, I'll briefly explain what this card means when it appears in a reading. Then we'll talk about what each element symbolizes and what the card means when it shows up in both the upright and reversed position in a reading. I'll share some examples from my life so you can relate to the card in a real-world situation. And stay tuned until the end, and I'll give you several questions to help you connect with the card. I will be using the Rider-Waite Tarot in this video. You'll find the link to the deck below, as well as to the many books that I've used in my research. So let's get started. In the Four of Pentacles, we see a man sitting on a gray bench on a gray stage. On his head is a gold crown with the gold pentacle stuck to the top of the crown. He's wearing a red tunic, blue undershirt, black cloak, and orange shoes. He is holding a pentacle in front of his chest and has one below each foot. He is staring straight ahead with a serious expression on his face. There's a city in the background, and the sky is gray. When the Four of Pentacles appears in a reading, it means that you are completely focused on money, security, or material possessions to the point that you have withdrawn from other people. That you are frugal, miserly, or greedy. That you are very cautious. You are someone who values stability and financial security. That you are holding on to the status quo or resisting change. And finally, that you use your wealth to control other people. Let's talk about the symbolism in the Four of Pentacles. We see a man sitting on a gray bench, which is on a gray stage. The background is gray. In this case, I believe that gray represents that there is not a lot of life or happiness in his world. The man looks vaguely king-like, and I assume that the bench is meant to be a throne. He's wearing a gold mural crown. Mural crowns were an ancient Roman military decoration that were given to a soldier who first climbed the wall of a city and successfully placed their flag on top of it. The crown looks like the top of a castle wall where they had squared openings to shoot through. It looks to me like he is pretending to be a king. Take a look at the King of Pentacles and compare him to the Four of Pentacles. This guy looks completely fake. His clothes are modest, the crown looks fake, the throne looks like a modest bench, and he's also on a stage. Pamela Coleman Smith, the illustrator of this deck, had a career in the theater, and stage cards represent someone who was playing a role versus actually being real. So it looks like this guy was pretending to be a king by placing himself above the villagers and falling short. He has a gold pentacle stuck to the top of the crown. This indicates that all of his thoughts are about money. He's wearing a red tunic. Red is about passion, action, and love. So I'm guessing that all of his passion, action, and affection is directed towards money. He is wearing a blue undershirt. Blue can represent imagination and expansiveness, so it seems that he has some big ideas about what this money represents. His black cloak is wrapped around him and symbolizes his need to protect himself. He doesn't want anybody stealing the pentacles. He has orange shoes, which can represent harmony and contentment, so it appears that he is quite pleased by this situation. In addition to the pentacle on the crown, he is holding a pentacle in front of him and has one below each foot. The pentacle in front of his chest blocks anyone from getting near him. He is holding it in a very uncomfortable position, which keeps him from touching anything else. The two pentacles on his feet show that money provides his foundation. He is staring straight ahead with a serious expression on his face. Despite believing that he is a king and the fact that he is surrounded by money, he doesn't look happy. There is a city in the background, and he is clearly very separate from it. When the Four of Pentacles appears in an upright position, it could mean that you have set up a strong financial foundation. You are cautious and manage money well. You are working hard to conserve your resources to benefit you in the future. I feel like this is a person who accounts for every penny they spend and makes the maximum contributions to their 401k. It is not somebody who invests their life savings in cryptocurrencies. The Four of Pentacles could also indicate that you are receiving money or other material possessions, so it might indicate an inheritance, a return on the stock market, or a bonus at work. The rest of the meanings are more negative. You are so completely focused on money, security, or material possessions that you have withdrawn from other people. I actually know somebody who is like this. He is now very wealthy, but in his early years, he was so focused on building wealth that he worked 2 jobs and lived in a very sketchy basement apartment in order to save money. He had 0 social life because he didn't want to waste money on alcohol or restaurant meals. The Four of Pentacles can mean that you are frugal, miserly, a penny pincher, or a cheapskate. I'll continue this story about my very frugal friend. Eventually he got married, and his first wife told me that if he invited her out for ice cream, he would save the receipt and make her pay him back for her cone. As an aside, that marriage did not last long. This card can represent possessiveness and greed. You want control of your money and possessions. This isn't somebody that goes with the flow. It is somebody who could be considered a control freak. You might also control other people with money. It can mean that you do not like change and want to maintain the status quo, that your money is not making you as happy as you anticipated, that you feel trapped by your financial obligations. For instance, you hate your job, but you can't quit because you need to work to pay your expenses. The Four of Pentacles can indicate that you have a scarcity mindset and you want to make sure that you have your share of resources. I can certainly relate to this. I grew up in a family of 6 and we didn't have a lot of extra food. Our big treat was on a Saturday night. On Saturday morning, we would go to the local bakery where my mom would purchase 6 hamburger buns and a dozen donuts. Food was essentially rationed as we each got a single hamburger and 2 donuts. If you didn't eat your hamburger or donut right away, somebody would snatch it up and you'd do without. This is more than 50 years ago, and I still have issues leaving food and knowing that I can eat it later. Finally, this card can mean that your possessions own you versus the other way around. I can relate to this as well. My family had Siamese cats when I was growing up. For special occasions, starting in the 1960s, we would go to the jewelry store on Main Street and buy my mom a Siamese cat figurine made by a company called Beswick, which was a china manufacturer in England. Mom displayed these cats in her china cabinet, and they had a lot of sentimental value for me. A few years ago, my mom split up her collection and gave half to me and half to my sister. This is when I started to get a bit obsessed because I wanted the entire collection. So I was determined to purchase the cats I was missing. Every time I went to an antique store, I'd visit the figurine section and be absolutely euphoric when I scored another Beswick Siamese cat. I even bought a few duplicates. As I mentioned in previous videos, I've also had many pet dachshunds over the years. And one day, while searching for Siamese cat figurines, I found a Beswick dachshund in an antique store, and that began a new obsession. It became ridiculous, and at some point, I had to realize that I had enough, and my obsession kind of fizzled. But I do have them proudly displayed in my house, and they make me happy. Here's an example about a real-life miser, and it's about John Elwes, who was a member of Parliament in Great Britain in the late 1700s and is widely believed to be the inspiration for Ebenezer Scrooge in A Christmas Carol. There's an image of him on the screen. This information is from Wikipedia, and I put a link in the comments. John was born in 1714 to a wealthy family. He inherited his first fortune from his father, who died when he was 4 years old. At this time, his mother inherited £100,000, which would be worth about $23 million now in US dollars. However, she starved herself to death because she was too cheap to spend it. After his mom's death, John inherited the family estate. His second inheritance was from a miserly uncle. He left John a fortune of £250,000 in 1763, which would be worth about $51 million now. Despite his fortune, the uncle prided himself on spending little more than £110 on himself every year. Once he inherited his uncle's fortune, John adopted his miserly ways. Here are some of the things he did. He went to bed when darkness fell to save on candles. He wore only ragged clothes that were so dilapidated that people often mistook him as a street beggar and would give him money. To avoid paying for a coach, he would walk in the rain and then sit in wet clothes to save the cost of a fire to dry them. He would eat putrefied game before allowing new food to be bought. Once he ate a marsh hen that a rat had pulled from a river. Once he badly cut both legs, but would only allow the apothecary to treat one, and then he bet the fee that the untreated limb would heal first, and he actually won that bet. When he became a member of Parliament, he made the journey on a poor, lean horse on a route chosen to avoid tolls. He would put a hard-boiled egg in his pocket for food. He retired after 12 years rather than face the prospect of laying out money to retain his seat. His house fell into major disrepair because he refused to do any maintenance. He slept in his clothes, and in 1789 he was found dead wearing daytime clothing with tattered shoes on his feet and a torn hat on his head. In his final years, he lived on £50 a year. He left an estate worth more than $100 million today. So it's one thing to be frugal with money, but being a miser can be pretty awful. When the Four of Pentacles appears in a reverse position, it can be a more extreme version of the upright card. You have become even more greedy and materialistic. You value money and possessions over everything else. The reverse card can indicate reckless spending, losing control of your money, or making poor investments. It can mean that you are letting go of money or possessions that are no longer serving you. It can mean that you are being too generous. It can mean that you've chosen to take a vow of poverty or to share your resources with the community. It can mean that it is time to let go of fears and take risks. And finally, it can represent that you are not controlling things, but are going with the flow. Here's an example of the reversed Four of Pentacles from my life, and it's about letting go of possessions that no longer serve me. Over the last year, I've done a lot of donating to charity, and one group of items was particularly difficult, and that is books. First of all, I have to say that I love books. My house has so many bookshelves that there are many rooms where you can't see the walls. I shut down my coaching business at the end of 2022 and had bookcases full of business books that I had read once or not read at all. In 2023, I donated more than 500 books to a library sale. I knew that my business coaching days were over and that I no longer needed the books, but it was still really, really painful. Here are some questions to help you connect with the Four of Pentacles. Number 1, are you making good decisions about money and possessions? Number 2, are there any material possessions that you are clinging to? Number 3, are you focusing too much on financial security and too little on connecting with people? Number 4, are there areas in your life where you are being miserly? Are there areas where you are overspending or being too generous? And finally, do you use your money or possessions to control people? Or have other people used money or possessions to control you? So I hope that this has helped you to connect with the Four of Pentacles. And please join me for the next video, which is the Five of Pentacles.